National Editors Forum says it's saddened by the news of the passing of media executive Govin Reddy. He was instrumental in transforming the SABC following the end of apartheid. The 70-year-old passed away on Friday morning after a long illness. While to talk about the work and legacy and memory as well of Govin Reddy, we are joined from our Cape Town studios by Professor Alfred Ntshengedzeni, who served on the National Lotteries Commission. And here in our Johannesburg studio, we have Micah Reddy, son of the late media executive. That's Micah Reddy, actually, who is the son of the late media executive. Very good afternoon to you and welcome to SABC News. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Talk to us just about you growing up, watching your father, watching his work, and what are some of the things that you picked up from the way he was as a father, to the way he was as a husband, to the way he was as someone who made such a big impact in the media fraternity?
Well, as hard as these last few days and weeks have been, he's been struggling with illness for a while now. We've been quite overwhelmed by the show of support and the tributes that have been pouring in, and it's testimony to how many lives he touched and how many people he influenced. He was prolific. He had a very distinguished career that spanned academia and the media and activism. And it's been quite eye-opening to, it's hard as family to remember all the things that he did. He was on so many different institutions, various media bodies, various academic bodies, and people have been coming forward and telling us about their experiences with him. Colleagues that I hadn't met, people that have been household names for a long time, but I didn't really know or hadn't seen in a long time. And their stories have been very illuminating. I mean, he was an activist in the 70s. He was arrested and imprisoned for a period of 6 months. He spent time in exile. He was in exile in Zimbabwe, where he was very involved in the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. He also spent time in Rome with Interpress services, and then of course in the 1990s he was here at the SABC and spearheaded transformation here. And a great many people have come forward and have come to us, the family, and said that his legacy was an extremely positive one. That his role at the SABC was invaluable. And then, of course, he went on to head the Sol Plaatje Institute at Rhodes University, and he was a professor extraordinaire at Stellenbosch, where he taught journalism to a new cohort, a new generation of journalists. And teaching was another passion of his. Of course, one of his earliest jobs was as a history teacher at Inanda Seminary, the famous Inanda Seminary, which was like a sort of like the Fort Hare of girls' schools. And he taught some very prominent women who went on to become leaders in their field and leading political figures. And he taught history, but he was of course expected to teach the sort of Afrikaner nationalist version of history, but he taught his own subversive history. And I think he, in that process, politicized a lot of very prominent female figures. A prominent woman who went on to excel in their fields. And so he really has, he's touched a great many lives, and that has given us a lot of comfort, hearing their stories in these last few days and weeks.
It must have been very difficult for everybody as a family to see him fall ill and succumb to the illness. Is the family comfortable with revealing the details surrounding his illness that led to his passing?
It's complicated. We're comfortable with it. He was always described as a complicated patient these last few weeks, and ultimately it appears to have been cancer that he finally died of. But he put up an incredibly valiant struggle. As hard as it was to see him in these last few weeks struggling with his ailment, there were some very, very touching moments. He was able to, recount some of his many stories. He was a great storyteller. I think that's partly what made him such a good journalist. And he had many stories to tell, some of which we'd forgotten about. And so there were very precious moments in these recent weeks.
Fondest memories?
Sorry?
Fondest memories?
Well, it's, we've been overwhelmed by the stories. There have been so many. We've spent a lot of, again, as hard as it was, we spent a lot of quality time with him, by his bedside and just going over the past, recounting stories. He was a newsman through and through, and very good at recounting the past. He was a newsman and a historian. I think that's what made him such a good storyteller. And I think it's very hard, given how many stories we've been hearing lately, and how many memories have flooded our minds, that it's very hard to pick out a particular one. But I think just, the memories of listening to him recount his very adventurous, very exciting past really stand out for me. And, I think he instilled that sense of appreciating history and knowledge and storytelling in his friends and family and his 4 children. And, I think I'm now in media, and that's where
I was about to say, that's how you've become inspired with your activism in the media landscape.
Yeah, that's where I get it from. I get it first and foremost from my father. I think, he really instilled that love of journalism in me. And every morning when we were children, we would wake up to a full spread of the daily newspapers on the breakfast table and the BBC blaring in the background. And he really put a premium on being informed. He encouraged us to always be informed, to ask questions, to be curious. So it's been, we couldn't be prouder, and we couldn't be luckier to have had a father like that who really instilled those values in us.
Apart from his professional accomplishments, I think him as a man, a lot of people have a lot of fond things to say about him. He was warm and caring. What are other traits that described his character would you share with us?
He was a fighter, and that really came out in these last few weeks, struggling against this horrible disease. He fought really valiantly and with immense dignity, and was always grateful for those around him, always grateful to family and friends and to the nurses. And again, the news ran through his blood. He would make sure, even, in his dying days, when he was struggling even to breathe, he would make sure that he had the newspapers, that he stayed informed, that he knew what was going on in the world. And he had an enormous will to survive and to live life to the fullest and with gusto. And it sounds a bit cliche to say that, but he really did. And he'd been in and out of hospital these last few months, years even, because this illness really dragged on. And every time he was out of hospital, we had to try and encourage him to just stay put for a while and recover. But he wanted to plan trips to India, trips to Cape Town, to New York. He really wanted to squeeze every last drop out of life. So I think that is one thing that really defined him. There's lots more that can be said, but yeah, his love of information, his passionate, curious mind, and his sort of breadth of interests and love for the world.
Wow. And has the family made any arrangement in as far as the memorial and the funeral? Do you have any details for us that you can share?
Well, it's been a very hectic few days, and we are frantically planning things. There will be a funeral in the week, and we'll have a larger memorial that we would like to encourage people to attend. We'll be publicizing that, and that will likely be next Sunday.
All right, Micah Reddy, thank you very much, and condolences to your family.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's Micah Reddy speaking to us about the death of his father, who's the South African National Editors Forum, saying that they are deeply saddened about his passing. Of course, he's played a major role in many organizations within the media landscape, and it is indeed a sad day, yet a celebration of his life that was lived to its fullest.